Hello there, it's Thomas Marr from PlanetF1.com reporting from the British Grand Prix paddock. It's in full pack-down mode, as it nearly seems to be every time I'm recording one of these videos. But it's not very pretty here in the paddock at the moment. A lot of pack-up machinery and personnel walking around, and that's why I have to wear one of these very fetching high-vis vests while I'm down here recording. And behind me you can see the press pen where the drivers came through a few hours ago. But let's talk about today's race, which was won by Lando Norris for McLaren, ahead of Oscar Piastri in the other McLaren. And third place, probably the most popular result of the day, Sauber's Nico Hulkenberg getting his first podium since entering the sport 15 years ago. Now, I know he had a few years off in the middle of that, but 15 years since Hulkenberg made his debut, he finally gets his first podium, and it's the longest career in Formula One without a podium, and that record came to an end today. So well done, Nico Hulkenberg. Fourth was Lewis Hamilton for Ferrari, fifth was Max Verstappen for Red Bull, sixth Pierre for Alpine, seventh Lance Stroll for Aston Martin, eighth was Williams Alex Albon, ninth Fernando Alonso for Aston Martin, and 10th Mercedes George Russell. Where do we start? I think we start with McLaren, because it was a very interesting race between the two McLarens today. It's probably the first time we've seen Oscar Piastri kind of annoyed, not really being his usual chirpy self. Things didn't work out for him today, and to be honest, it's pretty much his own fault, because in the early stages of the race, Verstappen was leading, but he was running a very, very low downforce configuration on his Red Bull. Christian Horner explained this to us after the race. They weren't expecting rain today, Red Bull. Their weather forecast predicted a 20% chance of rain in the morning, Sunday morning. So as a result, they fitted a Monza level of downforce to the RB21. This worked brilliantly in qualifying. Verstappen took pole position, really, really good start, but in the wet weather, this lack of downforce very much exposed itself. And it was probably one of the most wayward races we've seen from Verstappen in a long time. A couple of leery moments going through Maggots and Beckett's, struggling to keep the McLaren behind him. And we even saw him have a half spin coming out of Copse on one of the safety car restarts. So in the end, he wasn't able to keep the McLarens behind him. Piastri got past him. Norris got past Verstappen as well. There was a little bit of it swapped back for a while between Norris and Verstappen due to a slow stop from McLaren. But all in all, things were falling into place very nicely for Piastri. That was until a safety car intervention, which was deployed due to the worsening weather conditions, some quite heavy rain that started to fall around lap 12, lap 13. But Piastri, when the safety car lights went off going down the hangar straight in order to kind of give the signal we're about to restart the race, Piastri slammed on the brakes. He applied 59.2 psi of braking pressure. He reduced his speed from 218 kilometers per hour down to 52 kilometers per hour. The suddenness of this meant that Verstappen kind of sailed past him under the braking. Very similar to what we saw between Russell and Verstappen in the dry conditions in Canada. The FIA weren't impressed. The stewards investigated the situation, and Piastri was given a 10-second penalty for a breach of Article 55.15, which pertains to erratic braking under the safety car. And this 10-second penalty meant that Piastri was basically powerless. He wasn't quicker than Norris overall over the remainder of the race. He came in when he served his penalty. This gave up position to Norris. It allowed Norris through. And Norris didn't put a wheel wrong for the rest of the race. Was there a bit of luck involved for Norris? Yes, of course there was. Piastri looked to have matters in hand otherwise. But Piastri did make that all too critical mistake. And I think it's fair to say he was kicking himself after the checkered flag. Now, the feeling within McLaren seems to be that it was a very, very harsh penalty. They said that they're going to be kind of internally reviewing the situation as to what happened there. And Andrea Stella, when he was speaking to us, he kind of implied that there might have been a little bit of gamemanship from Verstappen, might have been over-egging the required braking just a little bit in order to make the incident seem worse than it was. Did Verstappen do that? It's kind of hard to tell, really. It did look like a legitimate Max getting completely caught out. There's a van coming up behind me, which is why I'm looking. But Max did appear to be genuinely caught out by the situation. And Oscar said in the press conference that he was confused by the situation. He didn't think Max needed to take avoiding action behind him, kind of suggesting along the same lines that he thought Max might have been overrating the situation a little bit. But either way, it was a bad mistake. Piastri very morose, very downbeat, not himself at the end of the race. I think he knew he'd given Norris some very valuable points, because the championship standings after this weekend are Piastri is on 234 points, Norris is on 226, that's 8 points between the two McLarens, with Verstappen now 69 points behind Oscar Piastri in the championship. So Red Bull, they said that their race would have been very different if the conditions had stayed dry for race day. Obviously, we saw the great result on Saturday, but that Monza specification, that Monza level of downforce that they were running, meant that the minute that rain came, they were doomed. There was nothing even Verstappen could do, and we obviously saw Yuki Tsunoda toiling away as well towards the back. But let's talk about Nico Hulkenberg, because he raced to third place today. He pitted quite early on for another set of intermediates. Obviously, he started towards the back, 19th place. Fitted a set of intermediates and just worked his way up as others made mistakes, pitted, and he found himself up to 4th place behind Lance Stroll. Managed to catch up on Stroll, overtake him as the intermediates degraded, and he was up to 3rd place. But Lewis Hamilton also was coming up behind in the Ferrari, and he overtook Stroll, and everyone in the media centre was, you know, kind of thinking, oh, Hamilton, here comes the dream spoiler. And even though he was a home hero, I think people were willing Hulkenberg on to finally get that elusive podium. And out of nowhere, Hulkenberg just seemed to be able to start pulling away from Hamilton. And then there was the final round of pit stops where there was the switch over back to slick tyres. And Hulkenberg, because Sauber waited one extra lap past Hamilton's pit stop, Hulkenberg was able to pull out a bigger gap over Hamilton, protected himself, and he was able to bring that home. And you should have heard the roar. We were standing here waiting for the drivers, interviewing some of the drivers when they were coming through the press pen. Well, you should have heard the roar that went out from across this whole area as Hulkenberg came home to finally take that elusive first F1 career podium. So well done to Nico Hulkenberg. Absolute celebrations and carnage down at Sauber this evening. Lewis Hamilton, he had a very strong race overall, very happy. Ferrari in general seemed quite happy, apart from Charles Leclerc. He was brought in for dry tyres at the end of the first lap, and this proved to be an absolute disaster. And George Russell was another to be brought in for that. It was a bad day for Mercedes overall. Kimi Antonelli, he retired due to diffuser damage when he was run into by Isack Hadjar, the Racing Bulls driver, another one to be fitted with the slick tyres very early on, as some teams took a gamble on in the changeable conditions. But Hadjar, he didn't see Antonelli. He couldn't see him in the visibility. Went straight into the back of the Mercedes. Both retired. Gabriel Bortoleto as well. In the other Sauber, he retired due to rear wing damage. Spun off at the first corner and ended up with damage behind him. As I said, Lawson, he was involved in an incident on the first lap with Esteban Ocon, and he got spun out when the two made contact. Just a racing incident. Franco Colapinto, the last retirement, he actually didn't even start the race due to a driveline issue on his car. Not good timing for him. All sorts of rumours around whether he'll be in the car for Spa or whether it could be someone like the other Alpine reserve, Paul Aron, or possibly even Valtteri Bottas. But yeah, very interesting race here, I think. And the only other thing I think we've got to flag is that there was a very tricky moment for Haas today. Not a good day for Ayo Komatsu, simply because the team owner Gene Haas is here today, but his two drivers collided. It wasn't well managed. Hands up from Haas. They didn't execute a good race today. And these are the kind of days where teams like Haas can capitalise in the same way that Sauber did today. So well done. The result, I think, dominated today by Hulkenberg's result. But of course, in the championship context, it's all about what Lando Norris managed to pull back in on Oscar Piastri. That's it from us here at the British Grand Prix. Join us on planetf1.com throughout the week for all the reaction across our website and across social media.